So I've had a problem with this mic, but I think it's going to be fine.
No, it sounds good. Those are great. I've had, you're the second one that's had one of those, and I'm always like, damn, I should get one of those.
Matt, right? Do you know what? So I've been working with quite just a few singers recently, because I've been mainly mixing through just COVID and stuff, because it's been really difficult to get into studios. So I've been doing a lot of like mixing and vocal sessions. The amount of people that have people that have sung on a lot of mics, and before the session I'm like, what do you like to use, and they're just like, whatever, set it up, and I put them on this with, I've got the Halo, and I've got my little SSL 2 Plus, and they're like, what have you done to my vocal? So I've hooked them up with Aston, a good couple of people,
really,
and then almost don't want to tell them how much it actually costs, because you sort of think that they think you're cheap or whatever, but it just sounds unreal.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a few people it doesn't suit, but
Sure.
in the same way as like a 47, there's a few people it doesn't suit. It could just sound nasty, but most people, it just sounds great. Aside from price tag, if I had it in a row of mics, I'd pick it.
Yeah.
It's really good. Like the Starlights are good as well. Have you seen those?
I haven't
ones?
seen those. No.
They've got like a laser on them, man, which I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
So to like find your point or whatever. But if you just turn off all the gadgets, it's like they sound like 414s or something, and they're like so cheap. They're all the Aston stuff's great.
Yeah, I actually have seen those. I remember thinking like, well, that's kind of gimmicky, but it could be useful, like drums, if you're trying to make sure you're focused on the same point. That's great. I've always been intrigued by their stuff. I just I've never got my hands on it, but that's
is it big? Is it getting over to you guys then? Because like they very much pushed it here. It was like British company, but I presume they're going like worldwide now.
Yeah, I remember when it first started. Like Guitar Center was pushing it pretty heavily.
Okay.
And well, Guitar Center's kind of taken a hit in the last couple of years, so that kind of But I do remember when it hit the market, there was a big push here too. I just think it definitely caught on over there, much heavier than here.
Yeah, they're great. They're really, really good.
But yeah, that's this is kind of, we got right into tech speak. I love it.
I know. Sorry, I was like straight away, and I'm asking you like I'm the interviewee. You're the interviewer.
No, I love it going back and forth. That's what makes this fun. Is I don't want to be the only one like asking all the questions. Are you is this your studio here that you're at?
So this is it's I've only just moved in here. I got my first own space about 4 years ago.
Cool.
So I was mixing out of various different studios, predominantly the studio where I was the in-house engineer. But I went freelance about 18 years ago, but it's quite close to me, a place called Mole's Studio in Bath. So I would book that. I had it block booked for months at a time for different projects, for tracking and for mixing.
Yeah.
And then I live really close to Real World Studios. I'm in the southwest of England, so Peter Gabriel's place is just down the road. And which is awesome. So I was mixing out of there for a while. And amongst a few things happening, a fire at Mole's studio, so that unfortunately closed down.
Yeah.
And also people not wanting to pay on top of my mix fee for me to rent a room.
Right.
Even though I was, I wasn't taking huge amounts of time, and I was pretty much still in the box, so I could do tweaks and stuff outside of it. But lots and lots of stuff changed to the point that I was like, okay, it became pretty much industry standard that of someone at a certain level, you need your own mix room. So I got a place eventually. It's so hard. I don't know what it's like where you are, but so my remit was, I want 24-hour access. I want somewhere I can make as much noise as I want, and I have no noise coming to me.
Yeah.
I want daylight. I want my own kitchen and bathroom. And the amount of places you find where at least one of those things is missing, it's super, super hard. And also the other thing was proximity to home, because I have children and a family, and I was sort of trying to make my life a bit more normal.
Yeah.
So I ended up, me and my wife, just making up some flyers, because I'd drive to Real World, or I'd drive out to Bristol, or like these other studios I'm working in, and driving past all of this like countryside and agricultural buildings. It'd be like someone's got to have a space. Anyway, some guy got back to me, pig farmer, found literally a pigsty. and I walked in and I'm like so excited. I'm like, yes, this is it. It's like 5x5 and there's like a bit on the side. I'm like, that could be. And this farmer's like looking at me like, what are you like? Why are you so excited? But it had like a sloping roof. It had the corners taken off. So I built a room in there, nice. And it was amazing. Mixed all sorts of records in there.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately there was a planning application issue which was entirely out of my hands, which went on for ages, and I got thrown out. So I've moved into a place here which a friend of mine owns, and it's good. It's really huge. I was so worried about how big it was. And when I was coming to sort of look round it and measure up and stuff, it was like, church chamber echo. Sure. But with a bit of like, I've got a cloud floating and stuff, and it's great. So I'm in here. It saved me through COVID. Having my own space, and having somewhere. Well, this I share with a friend, but in like full lockdown, a year or so ago, my place it was single access for me, so I could go up there and work, which was just fantastic.
Yeah, that's so crucial in this.
Absolutely,
this time.
I'd always wanted my own space. It would just got to the point where I had to have it. It's a big undertaking. I'm sure you must realize you're paying the rent on somewhere. You're maintaining, all these other places I go into.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong, then that gets fixed, and I come back the next day. Now I've got to have all my own equipment in there. I have to maintain it and clean it and pay the rent and stuff. But the thing of just having my own room, and the all the big guys have their own room, don't they? And that's the consistency in a lot of their work. And you sort of realise that, like, so now I get it. I get why I can work quicker, and I can walk in every day and feel super comfortable. So it's been great. This is frustrating because this isn't going to be permanent. So I already know I'm going to have to move somewhere else. But it's I just love having my own space. It's just so freeing, really.
It really is. I mean, I had this other space. It was in a different part of town that, like, when my wife and I just moved back to Arizona, like, would be last May. So we were in Nashville. We just moved back because all our family's here and all that. And when we first moved back, we were initially living with family until we were trying to figure out where we could live, because I don't know what it's like where you guys are, but the housing market is insane here.
Likewise.
It's mental. So we were living with family, and I was having to like mix on headphones in like the corner of the room, and they have a kid and we have two dogs, like, together we had dogs. So it was just like, it was chaos. And I was like, man, I really need to find my own space to like work. And like a similar thing with you, I had a friend that was like, oh, I've got this spot that you can move into. And it was like just having your own dedicated space for, like you said, the consistency of your work, and just having a place that you're like, okay, this is work now. I go here and we get everything done, and then go home, and it's really important. I mean, I think the two disciplines, one of it being a place of work, like, when I was mixing out of Moles, and when I was mixing out of Real World, and when I was mixing out of places in Bristol, I may be there for a couple of weeks, but I wouldn't be there the whole time. Right.
None of them, Moles, I guess, to a point, but none of them I entirely trusted to send a mix from, and nothing to do with the rooms, just because I wasn't there the whole time, without taking it home and checking it to make sure that there wasn't any, just stuff that I wasn't quite hearing in the room.
Right.
And since moving into my place, and then with a bit of tweaking, and in here as well, I'm at that point where I entirely trust it because I hear it every day.
Right.
It's like, I don't know, there's a lot of, I think a lot of people have said it, but Andrew Shep said it in a thing that I watched a few years ago, and it really stuck with me. It's like, you could mix off a pair of out of phase battered hi-fi speakers in your living room if you hear them every day.
Exactly.
Because you hear other music on those, so you know how to then make the judgment call. And that, it's as simple as that to me. Just being really, really. I listen to music all day, always have, wherever I mix, to try and keep a my ears in check and a balance, but I know exactly what this room now sounds like, and I know if I take it out of here, it will sound the same.
Yeah.
Which is just the confidence in that, and the amount of time that you can save is just so, because man, taking mixes out of rooms and then you get home and it's like, well, I didn't have all that bass there, or I had all that bass there, or it wasn't that fizz. Is just, and then you're in the room adjusting. I call it mixing blind, because I'm then going, oh, okay, well, if the bass is now quiet, it will be loud. That thing. It's just hot. It just completely throws you.
Yeah, you literally are mixing blindfolded, where you're just like, well, I think this is enough low end. If you're in a room that is tricky, because I think I won't out the studio, but there's a studio I worked at in Nashville that was like great, like everything on paper just checks all the boxes. A great control room, great Neve, great everything. And you're in there, and I was in there and I was like, man, this, like, the kick drum's like really rocking. Sounds fucking great. And I get it home, I'm like, oh boy, I got tricked big time. And that was like, they had Barefoots, so like Barefoots already are pretty hyped, but I checked it on the NS10s. I checked it on, they had one of the little Avitone. I was like, oh, I'm okay. And I get it home, I'm like, man, I got honey dicked. Wow, okay. Like, samples to the rescue. But that's one of those things that, like, you touch on, and I think is really important for, like, I get asked a lot from, people on Instagram will send me a message of like, what's a good monitor set? Or like, what do I get? I'm like, people are always shocked when I say I mix on KRKs. And that's like you said, it's because I know those speakers. Like, I know them better than I know any other set. That's what I mix on every day. It's like, don't get too wrapped up in the gear. Yes, it can be important, but if you are consistent and that's what you work on every day, and you know those speakers, you can mix fucking great records on speakers. You can mix them on headphones.
Absolutely. It's just what you know.
Yeah.
100%. Even the room stuff that we've talked about is only really a problem when you're not in those rooms regularly. Like, there are very few rooms, I think, and again, no disrespect to any studios, because it is the nature of rooms, but there's very few rooms that I've gone into for a day and done a mix and come out and got it at home and been like, yeah, cool, that's exactly what I was hearing.
Yeah.
But in terms of what you're listening on, like you're saying, it's just whatever you're used to. I don't think that there's, I used to mix on 10s, man. I've got a pair of 10s in front of me now, and they're purely cosmetic at the moment. They don't even have an amplifier attached to them.
Yeah.
I think I'd really struggle now to mix on 10s, but because I used to mix on 10s every day and I used to track on 10s every day, that's what I used to mix on, and they sounded fantastic. Like, I mix on Adam speakers now.
Okay.
I've used them for a long, long time. There's a lot of people that don't like them. They're very directional, so when you're not in the listening position, you do lose a lot. So I think people that I'm working with sometimes struggle with that. But for me, again, I can hear what I need to hear on those speakers.
Yes.
And make and then react and make the changes that I need to make. It like you're saying, there's a lot of people coming through now mixed on headphones, and I really admire that. I can't do it. I don't listen to music on headphones ever. Maybe on an airplane.
Yeah.
Is possibly the only time.
Wow.
So I find it so alien to listen on headphones and then to try and mix on headphones, which I have sometimes in desperation, but I can't react to what I'm hearing because I don't understand it like someone that listens all the time. It's consistency, isn't it? It's like,
it really is. And that's one of the, I got pretty used to mixing on headphones just out of necessity, because I was in a room that, wasn't treated for a long time. Like, and sometimes I had to take the room out of the equation. I'm like, okay, like I got to get a better feel of what's going on, like in the low end, because I don't have a sub either, so I got to check it there. And then I for me, I do a ton of referencing. It's like, I know my room and I know my speakers, but I'm also like, I'm a perfectionist in the sense that I don't want to send out, like, I don't want to just get the first ref, like, to the point where I'm like, okay, it's good enough to send, and I'm going to send it. Like, I want to make it as best as I possibly can in that frame of reference, because, I don't know what it's like for you, but for me, it's like you get this frame of reference when you get a mix, and it's like my initial impression of the song, and that's what I'm trying to get it to. And then I'll get it to that and then send it off, and then the client's notes or their perspective on it refocuses my perspective again. And it's like, oh, I'm missing this thing that I wasn't really fully paying attention to without even realizing it, you know? You sort of tune into these other things. It's like one of the best things is I'll just have somebody else come sit and listen to the mix, and I'll watch them.
Yeah.
And it's like you get to almost hear it again through them hearing it for the first time.
What is that mad thing about someone else being in the room when you hear stuff? So friends, I'll play stuff to friends with no remit, not what, you know, something on work, just play something.
Yeah.
See how they react. Also, I don't know what it is about the way that you hear it when there's someone else there, but you hear it in such a different way.
It is.
And like you're saying, like reaction, you know, if I play a mix at home and my wife's like off to make a cup of tea by the first chorus, I'm like, that's not flying. You know,
yeah.
It's like, it is just those natural reactions is, it's because it's so hard to refocus on stuff, isn't it? I was talking about this to someone earlier about, I'm working on something at the moment and I've definitely heard it too many times. And I wish I could just reset my brain on it and have never heard it again.
Yes.
And I tried different ways of doing that, like different environments, or, you know, the sort of a distracted listen, as I'll call it, where I like be on the phone sometimes, or you know, halfway out the room and listening and stuff to try and hear it in another way. But in terms of the first mix, it's, I don't know, I think people sometimes like, you know, you spend too long on before you send it out.
Yeah.
Because also my first mix is like, here's where I'm going. It's like, you know, the email pretty much goes, okay, here's my mix one.
Yes.
Not a finished mix. I haven't dotted the I's and crossed the T's, but
yes.
just want to check the direction. Like, that's sort of a bit wide because it's more than that.
Right.
I'm happy with it.
Yes.
But I don't want to be like, this is how it is. And often it is that you've done your thing, or what the band or artist said that they wanted, but that's not necessarily the way to go. But at the same time, it's still got to sound like you've got to blow them up. You know?
Yeah, and I think I maybe misrepresented the way I handle it in saying that I want it to be like a perfect like first ref is broad strokes, like big stuff. Exactly. That's what I'm getting at, is like the low end, the overall impact, like, you know, sort of broad strokes. This is where we're going, and then like you said, I haven't really dotted the I's, crossed the T's, all that sort of stuff. And let's get a check of your temperature before I really like take it that extra 15%, 20% to like finish.
Absolutely, because then the 5 hours of automation and the vocal spins and the full attention to detail, there's no point doing that until, like you say, like the broad strokes. But the broad strokes at the same time can't be like just thrown around, because then it's like, you know, it's that thing, is like, oh yeah, it will be great when, keep going, man, and you're like, okay, that's not right. We're not, you know, it will be great. It will be great when it's mixed. You know, that thing.
Oh, thanks.
It's like
really made me feel great about this. I love that one. Oh, it'll be great when it's mastered. Oh, dude, it's already out. Like, fuck. Yeah. Like, man, crushed me. Yeah. No. But you know, I'm always kind of I love talking to people about this, and especially on like the engineer side of it. Like, what brought you into music initially? Was it playing in bands, or were you always really interested in the technical aspect of this, or what was it that sort of brought you into this world?
So it was both. So my dad is just like a huge music fan, and was like in a band, and it didn't happen, and he became a teacher. So there was always like, he played guitar. There was always guitars around and stuff at home, and an incredible record collection. And he was really chill with it. Like, he never really pushed me towards it, but I sort of naturally picked up guitars, and you sort of found my way through his record collection. You know, man, the guy still buys more. He's like in his 70s. The guy still buys more records than I do.
That's amazing.
Now it's like unreal. So he was buying lots of contemporary stuff. You know, like I guess when I was first sort of aware, it was like, you know, mid 80s, late 80s, but then had, you know, his record collection from when he was younger. Mm-hmm. So there was that side of it. And then I was also a like super geek, like into electronics and making little recordings with tape machines, and making like things with buttons and lights on, because I thought that was like, that excited me.
Yeah.
So the two sort of went hand in hand, I guess separately at first. And then I started playing in bands, which I absolutely loved. I started playing bass. Oh. So cause my friend got a guitar for Christmas, so I was like, okay, well, he's got a guitar, I'll get a bass. So we'd sit around just playing riffs endlessly, and then eventually started a band. Yeah. Which was just super fun. So at the same time, I was recording our band. So the school that I went to had a Tascam 4-track cassette recorder.
Oh, sick!
Which so in the music department, which no one really in the music department, like, they had no use for it or didn't really know how to use. So I could have that on weekends, and like, you know, like is it Radio Shack? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
You guys right? Yeah, like Tandy, Radio Shack. Those, like, you know, those mics that almost float because there's just nothing.
Yeah,
to them.
yeah.
Couple of those, and started making little recordings. Sort of started understanding overdubbing.
Yeah.
Started, you know, we'd make little music videos, borrow a VHS camera, and then figured out that you could record onto the audio tracks of the VHS. So like, sort of started piecing things together.
Yeah.
And then went to record a demo with my band, and I think we were like 14 or 15. But I saw the guy recording us, the engineer, and I was just like, okay, that's what I want to do. Like, it was a real light bulb moment for me.
Wow.
When I saw just all of the tech and what was going on, and some of the things that he showed me, because I was just super keen, and probably super annoying to, you know, some guy that's just got some band that can half play, and you know, and then it's like, okay, tell me about this and tell me about this. But it was just a weekend that sort of cemented this, really. And then that was it. I was like, that's what I want to do. So the band kept going for a bit, and then it sort of that sort of fell apart. And I was writing to studios in the UK, just trying to get work experience. But you know, it's very catch-22. They're like, well, you know, we can't let you in unless you've got experience, and you can't get experience unless, you know, unless we let you in.
It's ridiculous.
So yeah, that was why I wanted to get into it. And then I did A levels, which is like when I was like 16, 17 or 17, 18, I guess, sort of floating around trying to get a place in a studio. And then had a incredibly well-timed meeting with a lady called Jan Brown, who I owe so much to. She'd seen my younger brother's band playing in Moles. So the studio I was talking about had a nightclub attached to it.
Oh, cool.
She saw them. She was like managing them because she thought they were good, which they were. And I met her and recorded a demo for my brother's band. And the next day, the engineer left the studio. So she phoned me going, there's a space available if you want it. Like weekends and evenings. I was supposed to do weekends and evenings. So I stayed at school, just, you know, making tea and getting sandwiches and cleaning and stuff. But, you know, I was obviously there as much as I could.
Yeah.
And it was local. You know, I would have moved anywhere, slept in a box, you know, to get into a studio.
Yeah.
And it was local to me. It was like 20 minutes up the road. So
perfect.
It was a really amazing set of events that led to that. And then off I went.
Yeah.
You know.
I just love hearing those all the little things that kind of compound into like that perfect sort of situation.
Being able to get in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I was fortunate in one respect that I don't know how it is for most people. I know a few of a lot of friends and stuff like didn't know at that early point in their life what they wanted to do.
Right.
So there was that, which I don't, I just had this thing about, well, it had to be something to do with music in my mind. And then the whole technology thing, as I said, came along. And then I guess you just, you start getting yourself in those situations, don't you? Mm-hmm. Not even knowingly, like, oh, okay, well, if I do this, I might meet someone and that might get a job. But you're getting within that world.
Yes.
And then gradually meeting more people. And
yeah.
Also, I guess if you're in that world, like, playing with bands, I think has been so good for then being a producer.
Oh,
because
big time.
The understanding of what they do and
yes.
traveling and being in a van and all of that stuff. So
yep.
all of it is just setting, the path that then you'll hopefully get the opportunity.
Yeah, and you also you can speak the language. You have the same sort of vernacular, and you can come from a place. Very often some producers can come from a place of like authority, and that's usually why you want a producer. They're the boss, but there can be some bands that, bands have egos. That happens, and sometimes they're like at first they want to challenge the producer, and they kind of push back. But if you have that music experience, I think that also, that's a chip in your favor with them too. You can come from the same place. Yeah. So
absolutely, I think it works with certain artists.
Yeah,
and not others. I guess it's probably the reason that I've generally worked with guitar bands and I've generally worked with alternative bands.
Yeah,
it's probably I don't do much like pure pop stuff, and the route I've taken to get to where I am, none of that stuff is really applicable or probably attractive to a pure pop artist.
That's
what I mean? So it's like where maybe someone with a more leading a project and probably a more like music theory songwriting background would be more appropriate to them. So I guess it's sort of guided that the sort of people that I've got to work with. But I guess that's also because that's the sort of music that I like, and that's why I was doing that stuff in the
right
in those areas.
In doing the stuff that you like, you do your best work too, and that's just
absolutely
that's just
like
feeds itself.
I don't know how people work on records they don't like. When I was an engineer, when I was an assistant engineer, whatever came through the door, I had to work on, and I don't think I ever really thought about it or liking it or not liking it. I just was like, it's great, I get to put up some microphones, and so it didn't really matter about the content of it.
Yeah.
And also at that point, as an assistant engineer, you're not putting your love and heart into it. You're a part of the process, but it's very functional what you do. But as an engineer or producer, like, I have to love everything I do because I don't know how you could. For me, I don't think I'd be able to be. I don't think I'd be good working on stuff.
No,
I'm not really passionate about, because I think you have to put something into it. So I don't know. I'm very spoiled because I get to pick and choose what I work on. So I don't really know. But there's stuff that I pass because I had a conversation with a band recently that we were sort of early stages of working with, and I just had to put my hands up and go, like the direction you want to go. This isn't something I understand. It's not that I don't like it, but it's not a world that I understand, and there's no point in me trying to pretend that I do.
Yeah.
Because we're putting so much into this, aren't we? It's like, it's not just pressing buttons. There's emotion and time.
Sacrifice.
Okay, exactly. I was just going to say, exactly. So if you're not doing stuff that you love, then, what's the point?
Yeah. Because at that point, then you join the millions of people that are, slogging away at jobs that they hate, and that's the thing that, a lot of us have this luxury of, like, I say it's a luxury, but this is a really fucking tough business. So there's the
Yeah.
the trades. But, you know, a lot of the times we get to really love what we do and have a lot of fun while doing it. But there's a lot of sacrifice and a lot of hard work that goes into it. And people don't always expect that or see that side of it, where it's like, yeah, you know, this song that you might hear and really love, and, you know, it's 99 cents on your phone or however much it is now, or free on Spotify. It's like that was like weeks of sleepless nights, you know, bad health, not taking care of people not taking care of themselves, like blow ups, people throwing shit. Like it's a lot that goes into it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. See, that's the thing. I know, you know, I love what I do. It is just, to me, it's just the most incredible job. So I never, ever want to really go on about how sometimes it can be difficult, because I get for a lot of people that, like, there's a lot of people that want to do what we do, you know. But yeah, it can be, but it's a choice, you know. It's like, it's as someone said to me recently, we were having a big chat about stuff, because he wasn't going to be seeing his children for a bit because of work, and I was in the same issue. I was just about to go home and be like, okay, girls, you know, this has happened. So, but he said it's the choice we make for a fun job, and it's, you know, it's your own choice.
It is.
And also the highs that do happen, like some of the moments I've had in studios and with bands are just unexplainable. You can't really convey it to people sometimes how special those moments are. And being such a huge music fan, it just it for me it makes it worth it, like 100%. It's just experiencing things that many people don't get to, and
for sure,
you know, I always remind myself of that, because it's amazing.
It is, and even the hard times, they're fun to look back on. They suck when you're doing them, but they're the best stories. Like this shit, you know. Oh, my dog wants. Hang on, let my dog in. He's being an asshole.
No worries.
All right, come on in. Go on the couch. Chill out. That's Hank. What's up, buddy?
Hey, Hank.
But, you know, like, I can remember, you know, you get in, like, we have a 10 o'clock downbeat, which means I got to be there at 8 in the morning, and there's still a band in the room recording at 11:30, you know, and we have to break down, get all their shit out, and do a setup. And, like, the setups that we used to do when I worked for Jakir were fucking epic. I mean, we would be like you, we'd block out just weeks at a time. Like sometimes it'd be like 6 weeks in the same room. So like we want to have everything in the room that we might need to like move quickly. So, you know, we're lugging drums, like 6 to 8 drum kits and different snares and all this shit. So it's like, we're not done till 4 in the morning, you know, or 6, and you're like, well, I'll just sleep on the couch for 2 hours. And it's like, that sucks when you're doing it. But then it's such a fun, like, I went through that. Like, it was great. I think about it now, and it shapes the way you work, like how hard you are of a worker, or, you know, it just gives you a good perspective on things. And, you know, or like,
I couldn't agree more. Like when I was an assistant, so yeah, like you say, you know, this was sort of like late 90s, early 2000s when I started as well. So it was like, you know, 3 months an album, you know, big budget stuff.
Oh yeah.
Moles was, you know, you know, it was a really good studio. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't Abbey Road.
Sure.
But it was 48 track, big SSL, loads of outboard gear. Like there'd been sort of seminal records made there, so it had a really great reputation. And yeah, so these bands come in 3 months. You're like, yeah, like you said, you're in before everyone else. You leave after everyone else. You are never late, or you're sacked. I was never late, obviously. You know, often because, like you said, I'd just sleep under the desk.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, I ain't getting any sleep. And then so you do that, make a record with the band, get really tight with them, all awesome. You know, last night, bit of a knees up, everyone goes. next morning, we're to make a record, new lot, 3 months. It was like, it's insane.
Yeah.
But I think it's really, for me, it was really important to go through that stage of being an assistant, because I think it got me into the routine and my responsibility.
Yes.
You know, although assistant engineers can be very much overlooked. And when I said earlier about their job being functional, I didn't mean that in any way to be derogatory or make it sound unimportant.
No.
What they do, because you're fundamental to the session.
Sure.
You know, because of you have to unlock in the morning, like you have to set the stuff up and all of that stuff. But it was such a good training for me in terms of the culture of studios.
Yes.
Aside from the technology and nicking everyone's tricks, you know, I had time to, you know, this was like no iPhones, like no internet at first. So I just sit there and read manuals and like learn all of the gear.
Yeah.
Which was just like fantastic to be able to do that and be around it.
Yeah.
I loved it, man. Like, I can never write a book. It's such a shame, isn't it? So much of this stuff has to, like,
I know, it's got to die.
These stories can never be told. Yeah. But like you said, for me, it's like even the bad one. I'm like, the things that rattle around your head sometimes, the things you forget and then come up in conversation. Like, I was there for that, man. It was like special time.
And then you touched on something too that is one of my favorite parts, is the friendships that you and the relationships you build of like,
man.
I mean, I still talk to people that I was like a lowly assistant on their record like 5 years ago, you know, like, or the boys in Yumi at 6, like I think we did like 2 different sessions of like 3 to 4 weeks each. So it's probably 8 weeks in total. And like, we were genuinely fucking sad when they had to leave. Like,
I find it genuinely heartbreaking.
It was.
Right. This is a thing that I do talk to people about a lot, and it's very hard to explain. So we get to spend time with bands, and the relationship of a band it's beyond family.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's those sometimes where you wouldn't have picked each other. Sometimes it is that you know bands form because they're hanging out with their best mates.
Mm-hmm.
These people live together. Tour the world together in buses. They go through every moment of their lives together.
Yes.
Within very, very, very confined spaces. That the intimacy and the level of, I guess, like how open and vulnerable you are to show everything about yourself is. I think I can't actually think of other relationships where it's like that, because it's beyond a marriage. I think it's beyond a family. So that is so intense and so intimate. And then we come along, and I always have to remind myself that the bit that we do, recording, it's a very small part of a band's, I hate the word cycle, but you know, let's use the stereotype that they're on a 3 month of big tour right into the studio. So we're this very small window of what they do, but one of the most high pressured.
Yes.
Also, we're coming into it, whether we're an assistant or, you know, now I'm coming into it as a producer. Hi, right, I've got a huge amount of responsibility here in what happens next, and they don't necessarily know you. They might know you.
Right. You're
then sleeping together, eating together, sharing bathrooms, critiquing each other. It's such an intense thing, but it can lead to the most incredible relationships.
Yes.
And like you said, there's often tears when I finish records, because you've had this thing together.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things when I talked about highs earlier, it just makes it so worth doing, because these people are like 99.9% of the people I've ever worked with, I absolutely love. I think generally we're there because we're music fans, so there's that instant bond. We also have a goal in mind, so there's that bond, and you share these things together. It's so special. It's a shame that I haven't managed to stay in touch with as many people as I'd like to that I probably work with. You know, sometimes these things just fizzle out with messages and stuff, but you know, we're busy and that's the way that things go. But often I'll see people like years later and it would be like, man, and you talk about what you went through,
and you're right back to it too. It's like you didn't miss a beat.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that I really, really, really love about what I do. And when there were doubts in my mind about, you know, the wise split of like, I remember when I was younger and seeing these guys that were like my age going off on the road and having all these tour stories, and I'm like, oh man, should I have done that bit?
Yeah.
Then now I'm like, nah, I get to sort of be in a band for like 6 weeks at a time, and then another one, and then another one, and I don't have to go out in a van, and it's like, it's a really special thing.
You get the sort of the honor of becoming, you know, a temporary band member, especially as like someone that's is involved, like you're engineering a lot of what you're producing too, right?
The majority.
Yeah. So I mean, you are in it compared to like maybe like a Rick Rubin style producer that's kind of just more in the background and like, oh yeah, this is great.
No, absolutely.
You know,
I'm there.
Like you are in it.
I'm there for every single moment.
So you're like,
what happens.
You are an unofficial member of the band for however long you're making that record. So it's like you really get in tight, and it's something that's just, those are all my favorite memories of just like, one of my favorite records I've ever worked on was a record I did with Daughtry, and it had worked out that I was the assistant on the first half of the record, and then through whatever circumstances, the engineer wasn't able to finish the second half. And the producer was like, well, do you want the job? Like, what kind of question is that? Like, of course, like, yeah. And getting to go from like, you know, you're the assistant and you're in the room and you're all like, you're a part of the team, but now you're thrust into like, we're making creative decisions together. And now you're sort of like this part of the group of like, man, just the banter and the ball busting and like the fun we had making that record is like that trumps any of the other stuff for me of just like, I have friendships from that like I still send those guys like goofy texts and like, you know, it's like it might be months and then we'll just send like a stupid meme and then just back and forth, you know, and then it's like, all right, we'll see you in a little bit sort of thing. And it's just, that's the best part.
Absolutely. It's fantastic. But I guess, you know, also, sorry, excuse me, I was just going to grab a drink.
Yeah.
You know, I guess the reasons that you stay that connected and were in that position in the first place is because of trust and understanding, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the, you know, man, it weighs so heavy on my head sometimes when you're in, you know, you're calling shots on other people's work and you have a budget and it's something that I really try not to think about because at times it has been quite overwhelming, particularly with younger, newer artists. And you're like, if I mess this up, you know, this is an opportunity that they had that, you know, maybe will not be an opportunity anymore. But then at the same time, you've got to remember the reason that you're there and that they are. Not I'm always calling the shots, by the way. I don't mean to say that because to me it's fully collaborative. But the fact that even that your opinion is respected, or listened to, even if it's not agreed with, it's considered, is a huge thing, and that's the reason that you're there.
That's important. You know? Yeah. And it's
it's trust as well, isn't it? You know, that's
exactly.
I guess that's what most really close relationships, whether it be friends or partners or family, or it's trust. Yes. That you're gonna be honest and deliver.
Yeah.
You know,
it comes down to earning the trust, and then you kind of touched on this is not thinking too much about it and getting in your own way of just trusting in what got you to the dance, you know, and that's being you. and
Yeah.
and just following your gut. Like I had a friend that he called me. He's like, man, I had this vocal session. Somebody was coming in to do a spot on like a guest spot, and it's a famous singer. And he's like, man, I just kind of got like the vocals a little toasty. He's like, I was just riding a vibe and like went with it. And then like later I was like, oh, I'm a little concerned. And then we were just talking about it. And he's like, we just got to this point of like, man, that's why they hired you. They hired you because you catch a vibe and you go with it. You go with your gut and trust your gut. Like just go with trust the process, trust yourself, and it'll all work out. And it worked out. Of course, he's a fantastic engineer, but it's just trusting what got you there and not overthinking it too much.
I think, and that, I'd imagine, maybe, I don't know how it was, but maybe when it's someone, I've had that where with certain, maybe you get an opportunity to work with someone that you're a big fan of or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start overthinking. Like, I bet your man wouldn't have phoned you ordinarily if like, oh, I've just clipped this vocal a little bit.
Right.
It's maybe a bit hot, like whatever, but because you start overthinking stuff, don't you?
Yeah.
Gut is a thing that I've continually try and make myself listen to.
Yeah.
In life, but definitely in music. Like it's not that you're always right, but I think just following those decisions, the amount of times where something nags me and then I still either don't do it or go through with something's niggling, like no, and it isn't the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. But it's hard, isn't it? Because you don't always want to think that, like, I can't, maybe that isn't the thing to do. I don't know. It's very, very, very hard.
It is.
But the ones where I have sort of not got things right is generally when my head was going no, and then I haven't, and
yeah.
It's but it's high pressure environments, isn't it? Sometimes,
yeah.
So, and tiredness and all of that can like,
oh yeah,
start coming into play.
Especially the deeper you get into the record, it's you're
the 3/4 mark. Oh. The 3/4 mark, right?
Yeah.
So it's all going fantastic. And then you've got the little tick board. I don't do the tick board, by the way, because I don't like it. Scares everyone. It's like, no, we're fine.
Yeah.
It's like, and then you do that playback one night, and everyone goes to shit.
Yeah.
Is this good? What are we doing?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe
it's like
that.
It got real moment.
And it's always cool, always. And you were so vibing up until that point.
Yeah.
But it's incredibly difficult. Most of that I put down to exhaustion and homesickness by that point. It's like 4 weeks in or whatever.
Yeah.
And everyone's got their other stuff going on. And it's hard to then maybe see the excitement again. And then maybe you're laboring over a few things.
Yeah.
You've got a track going and it's great within a few days, and then still it's not quite there.
Yeah.
It's those are the times that I find really hard to push through.
Yeah. I feel like part of that too is a little bit of the anxiety of like, okay, this is getting like, you've put enough meat on the skeleton that now it's like starting to take shape of something. And it's like, can be this moment of like, oh fuck, like this is like, it's real. We're getting to the point of like, we're going to put this out soon. And like, is it good enough? And it's this sort of like self-reflection moment of like this hyper-criticalness of like, are we making the right decisions? It's like, whoa, what happened? Like, we were all on the same page, like for the last, 4 weeks, let's stay the course here. That's an important thing of just like, let's trust the process, trust each other.
I guess I digress, but the reason I was talking about that was because of that gut thing.
Yes.
And that's my thing. It's like, okay, look, we were jumping off the desk.
Yes.
2 days ago to this tune. Mm-hmm. So like, let's just keep that feeling.
Yeah.
And there's the over listening element of it as well. Like we started doing a thing on, it was on the Yumi 6 record, which you wonderfully mixed part of. But I did a playback one day in the studio, and I think it was a bit early. I got everyone in, and I was sort of sat there with a notepad, And then afterwards, I think it was Dan was like, man, like, let's do this like in the lounge by the pool next time. And it was a real thing of like, which I've really taken on since then, of like those playbacks, like, you know, not everyone just piling into the environment you've been working in, and it be like, you know, any other issues, you know, like an AGM.
Yeah.
And that's been really good.
Yeah.
That's been really, really good doing that. Since then, because it's sort of like that different environment.
Yeah.
I guess
you get to get some perspective because you snap into that like work mode, like when you're
well, it's also not so sorry. It's also so the amount of times that I play stuff in the studio. I don't know if you've had this, and you'll have a band member like this, like between the speakers, like super focus, and basically not hearing it how anyone else is ever gonna hear it. You know, and I'm guilty for this as well. Like definitely, like that edit or is that, and it's like, nah, like the you know the bigger picture. And I think removing yourself from that recording environment is definitely good for that. Also, like out of phones now, as much as I hate listening to music out of phones because obviously no bass, but just for hearing the overall, like, you know, not a mix obviously, but just like all stood there, put it on, and you just hear, you know, you hear the overall. It's like where you hear the like, maybe that melody needs some work. Or maybe we don't need that verse to be double, like super broad.
Yeah, you get the sort of passive listener of like, instead of this like hyper, you know, bloodhound where you're like, where's that one little part that I played? There it is. You know, like we need to bring that up. It's like, that's not
exactly that's exactly what I mean. It takes that bit, it takes the balance, and it takes how loud it is, and the detail, which when you're recording an album, you know, I always have stuff sounding as good as I possibly can all of the time. I have stuff on my tubas the whole time.
Okay.
When we're recording, not to cheat myself, but just to have the band completely vibrant the whole time. And I'll take it off at points to make sure I'm not, you know, fooling myself. But there'll be EQ, there'll be limiting on their headphone mixes, there'll be compression and limiting, just so every time they hear it back, it's like sounds as best as it possibly can at that point. But that's to inspire performance. When you're making those judgment calls, it's like super. Yeah, it was a really poignant moment for me. Of and also, sorry, going back to my original point, the 3/4 mark in the record, trying to remove some of that. Very, you know, everyone sat around and just going through the tracks in an order. Which is, you know, the reason I do it is so everyone understands where they're at and what bits we need to sort out. But it can be so detrimental as well to then the vibe of the session. You know, what do you do after that? What do you do after a sad meeting? Okay, well, let's record a vocal. It's like that's this game. That's the day over, isn't it? You know.
So that's an interesting. You just sort of touched on what I wanted to get into next. Is like I'd love to talk a little bit about your approach when making a record, and specifically I can sort of point to the You Me at 6 record that I was lucky enough to mix a couple on, just because I have some intimate knowledge of the sessions, just poking around, sort of doing like forensics, I guess. It was like I said it to Dan, and I didn't get a chance to say it to you, but just like poking around in those sessions, it's like there's like true brilliance in those, and seeing the way you guys were putting the stuff together and the way you were routing certain things, especially like Sucker Punch is just like this magnum opus. This is just this giant song with all these different things that are coming in and out, and it seems to me, and you can totally correct me on this if I'm wrong, but just looking through the sessions, it seems like creativity and flexibility is like first and foremost, and like in your approach of like, let's be able to just get in and catch a vibe and let's go. Like, what can you talk a little bit of just about your approach, and you can, I guess, specifically talk about that, or just in general.
So creativity and just getting in and going is everything to me. So yeah, so in terms of okay, so let's talk about like in being in the studio and recording, like whatever, regardless of whatever's gone on before that in terms of pre-production,
Sure,
or working from the demo or whatever. But it's my thing is keeping a room moving and keeping excitement going. So there was a producer I used to work with a lot, and his thing was always just do it, don't fuck about. If it's not right, we'll do it again, which just stayed with me, having worked with people where, you know, you might spend an afternoon getting a snare sound and it could sound fucking awesome, or it couldn't. But by that point, the band had gone, they're just completely disengaged from the process. So there's that thing of trying to move really quickly. It's hard because obviously you want it to sound like $1 million. I generally work residential on the Yumi record we did. Actually, 99% of the time I work residential, and I always spend. I think you like saying about the Chakir sessions. The first day will be everything up and working and rooted, so I can really quickly flick between different things. Obviously, that will get modified as we go,
right?
But just to be able to have not doing just guides. Unless we can help it, so I can just go really, really quick and record very, very quickly, just to keep the session going. Because I always want to keep people engaged, so I've got as many people in the room as possible.
Okay.
As well, like, you know, that thing of course everyone's going to disappear if you're spending, you know, an hour going through different guitar amps or pedals. And I want people to be there to have an input because it's everyone's record, you know. Like the worst thing to me is people coming back into the room and then you're going, oh, here's what we've done, and then they're being like, didn't, you know.
Yeah.
It's so soul destroying for everyone involved. You know, the person that's played the part, that you were taking it in this direction, and a lot of that can be avoided when most people are in the studio, and trying to keep people in the studio is by recording very quickly.
Yes.
For me. And then the creativity thing, again, it's often, even before we've maybe started a drum take, something will happen. There'll be a noise, or there'll be something, you know, something will go awry on the board, and then there's a little sound, and it's like, okay, let's have that as a loop. Like let's play to that new ear candy.
Yeah.
Whether that gets used on the record or not, in the end, is just that thing of it there being something new for people to get excited.
Yeah.
And concentrate on.
Yeah. At that point, it's almost irrelevant if it makes a record, if it inspires the take or it inspires the song.
Absolutely. So I have always got, I don't know if they were there when you got the sessions, actually. There'll be like 5 room mics and they'll be blown out.
Yeah.
They won't make the mix, but when we're tracking drums, because everything else is quiet, they're turned up and everyone's like, this sounds sick. And it's not that it doesn't without them. The dry sounds will have been gone through and everything will be fine, but it just makes everyone get super, super excited about it. And it's not a trick, and it's not covering anything up. It's just trying to keep the engagement.
Right.
And
that's an approach I've like, the longer I got into, like, you know, engineering and producing them, it's an approach I've took more as well, as specifically with like drums. It's like underneath it all, there's a rock solid drum kit that you can take in whatever direction you might need to, but all the other stuff is like, this is for the drummer, this is for us, this is for like excitement in the room. Like, let's get fucking jacked up about what's going on here. Because if it's just like a super clean like drum track, like you can find any studio in town that would like a decent engineer can give you just a sterile drum track. Like, let's do something impactful, you know?
Well, yeah. And something that may get someone to play in a different way. You know, it's like the Eno thing that's always really stayed with me about, you know, he would put on mad effects onto people's vocals that would have them sing in a different way, and then remove that effect and maybe do something different. So not that that's always what I will do, but the way that people respond, it's this headphone thing again, man. Like, headphones are just, so musicians are supposed to perform their best takes that are going to be archived and recorded and be around for longer than they are on headphones, which is not an environment that they're used to playing in. One, they're physical, they're on you, so they're restrictive. Secondly, most headphone mixes sound like shit. And getting that right is, it was the same producer that always told me about just moving swiftly. It was like, man, you master that fucking headphone mix. Multi-band limiters, like even pre-digital, we'd put everything we could on the headphone mixes to get them sound absolutely slamming. And then they're like, yeah, I can hear myself. You know, I can. I can perform into this. Yeah. You know, it's I think that's super important. Sorry, I'm digressing from your original question.
I have no idea. I mean, I'm going with it. I like where we're going. I love talking about this headphone thing, because that's a very often overlooked thing that should not be overlooked. And I don't know how it gets overlooked, but it really does. Is like, you know, even if like you go to audio school, like they barely fucking talk about headphone mixes. They'll say like, this is how you route to your cue mix. Cool.
Yeah.
What about making a cue mix that's like gonna allow the artist to perform in a way like you're saying? It's like, I can't tell you how many times I've had some of the greatest singers out there that are going, man, I can't figure out they're like, I can't do it. I don't know what's going on, like the headphones. And then you get in, you like put their headphones on, you're like, well, holy shit, dude, this is a mess. Like, like you get in and you sort of help them out. And that's one of those, like, I feel like expert level things when like you get to the point where, like you're saying, of like, let's make this a priority too, because this is something that's really overlooked.
But that's the thing, it shouldn't be expert level. It should be 101.
It really should.
It's so like the amount of times I've been in, and you know, like the little, as I call them, the rebigulator, your your mini jack. Big, so and it's just pulled out a little bit and it's out of phase. Yeah. They're like, oh man, you know, turn your effects down, and it's just because their whole mix is out of phase. But how, you know, that's our job, man. It's not their job to understand that. You know, and also, so when I started in the moles on tape, we were doing people's headphone mixes.
Yeah.
Which now looking back at it it's just terrific. So you can't really hear people shouting, oh, a bit more bass for me, a bit more guitar for me, and I'm doing these guys' headphone mixes. Yeah. I've also got the master level.
Yeah.
So, you know, a couple of times I've accidentally, and I've never permanently damaged anyone's hearing, but I've just like pot not working, cranked it, and they're like screaming. It's just like that in itself, being responsible for potentially damaging someone's hearing is not cool. And then so now we get these proprietary mixers, or you know, like the standalone mixers, which are fantastic. Yeah. So they can do their own balances and stuff. But then, so with most singers, I just give them a stereo and themselves.
Yes.
With some people, I just give them a mix. Like they just tell me where they want it, because they don't want to be worrying about that. You know, with some drummers, they'll want maybe the kick and snare separate, and then the click, and then maybe a backing track. But I also think those things can be very dangerous, because as much as it's like, oh, now the artist is in control, they're not a mixer, man. Mm-mm. Like, why should they be putting their own headphone mix together?
Yeah.
You know, it's like you said, I think it's something that's often overlooked, but it's another one of those things is like, what have you done? This sounds great. It's like nothing. They can hear themselves, and then everything else is easy.
And that's the thing. You know? It's like as soon as it's right, because then their performance is like next level.
Well, like you said, we've both worked with world class singers, and if they're not hitting it, you know there's something going on, and it's always the headphones.
Always, yeah.
Or the vibe.
Yeah. Or the vibe. The vibe can be important depending on the singers. So what are I mean, if you don't mind sharing some of your secrets, it's like what are some of the things you do on like headphones? Like, are you routing all from in the box, or are you using like a certain headphone system, like one of the Behringers, or like
It depends on the studio.
All right, sure, yeah, of course.
As to what they've got, but every studio I work in now has either got like the Furman one I really like. It's really robust, and it's got the power amps on it as well, so you can send it out, so you can do like little PA mixes and stuff out of it.
Yeah.
The Behringer one's cool, but all I'm doing really is, well, like I said, it depends on who it is. But for a singer, for instance, I will normally print a slave session one. So Pro Tools just runs super quick.
Okay.
So I may print basic stems that I can then rebalance stuff, but I will limit, EQ, compress the mix that they're getting. I will also have lots of different effects set up, just so they're accessible as quickly as they can be. But most of it, so I'll generally, I only monitor out of 2 outputs in the studio. I only ever monitor out of 1 and 2.
Okay.
I don't ever break anything out onto the desk, just because it means everything sounds the same when I load each session.
Yep.
And it seems, people seem to think it's a waste of a desk sometimes, but it's like, I know when I bring it to my place, it's like I haven't got any coloration from the center section that I'm going to lose, or any of that. But so I'll often use from like 9-10 upwards outputs, and I just have master faders that will have different plugins on them, just limiters and EQs and distortions often, and then going in and listening to the person's headphone mix. With digital now, we have you have latencies, and the amount of times I've had someone that's not realized that there's a latency going on, and then I've gone in and it's just slapping back, and you're like, okay man, that's the problem.
That's always the struggle when you're trying to like create a vibe and put those sorts of plugins and stuff while you're tracking is sort of finding ways around that latency.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's part of the reason I use slave sessions, because I often run native rigs.
Okay,
and you can get down to like 32 samples if there's not a lot else going on. So regardless, if it's whatever interface I'm using, I don't need to use their proprietary mixer. I can just do it all in Pro Tools, because I find that can slow me down sometimes as well. Like the UA console is fantastic, but it took me a little while to get used to, and I made some mistakes sometimes using it. So I just started crunching my sessions, and I've
fucked myself a number of times with that console. The way it interfaced with Pro Tools was kind of, at first, was a little, it's still not great. It's just sort of what they had to do. But the way it interfaces with, like, their, obviously Luna is fantastic, and I really love using it with,
Yes, I'm yet to experience that. But
I feel like
that was the thing. So with the
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, with the power of computers, we've got, like, the laptop I'm talking to you on now. This will run a slave session down to 32 samples. No problem. I can have live auto tunes if I need it. I can have many effects set up. And the thing again for a vocal session for me is preparation. Like, without putting this big, I'll shout you when I'm ready, and this big like setup and stress situation. Me and the assistant will have tested that mic 3 times. I will have quit Pro Tools and reloaded it to make sure that if it crashes during that session, there's no messing about, because that sort of stuff can really throw people. So I know you asked about headphones, but talkback is, to me, another thing that doesn't get talked about enough. Like, every person that ever records anything should go and be on the other end of the mic and have someone in a control room, because it can be the most lonely, awful experience when you're hearing a button clicking and out, and half of a sentence of like, well, that was a bit shit, and the guy's talking about the football game that they're watching, which they shouldn't be watching while they're doing a vocal, but that then freaks them out. So I have a talkback always on policy.
I was just going to ask, are you a talkback on always?
Always.
That's talkback etiquette, man. That's a big thing that is often overlooked, and that's something I talked about on a previous podcast with one of my good friends, Sean, who's an assistant. Well, one of his jobs, he's an assistant at Blackbird, and he's one of the best you'll ever see. Like, the guy's a fucking assassin, and he's a fantastic engineer too. But he was talking about, he's like, man, the amount of times I see like poor talkback etiquette, and the guys out there just waiting, like, hey guys, like, and people are like talking, and he's like, man, that's like, as the assistant, you don't want to be the one that jumps in and be like, hey man, great take or whatever. But sometimes it's like, you can't just leave him hanging. You gotta like, you gotta, so you have to experience it on the other end of the glass, like you said, where you're just like, you do a take, reverb tails rung out, you can hear playback stopped, and crickets.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, and you can see people talking in the control.
Like,
but again, all of this stuff we're talking about, headphone mixes and talkback etiquette. It's then when people are like, your records sound great. It's like, it's this stuff that is.
Yeah.
It's that stuff that's important.
Yes.
It's all of that stuff, because I can't EQ someone singing well into a record. Like all of the gear, it goes out the window. It's that stuff that, like, if the band are happy, then I'm happy, and if whoever's performing at the time is happy, I'm going to get what I want.
Yes.
And then which 47 I'm using and which preamp and all of that, as much as it is sort of important, it isn't, because
yes,
you get the performance.
Yes, and I've said that so many times, where it's like, so many younger engineers, particularly are guilty of this, or it's just like, what mic is that? It doesn't matter. Like, if the performance is good and you have decent enough gear, I mean, like, let's set a minimum bar of, like, you don't want to be like necessarily on a Tascam cassette recorder with Radio Shack mics for a professional recording, like you were saying, but like, if you have a bass level, like, some of the best vocals in the world cut on this $300 microphone, an SM7. Doesn't matter, because it's more about the performance and the setting, especially with vocals. I mean, vocals are the most important thing to have a vibe for, and so many people just get like, well, what mic is it? Like, man, you're really focusing on the wrong stuff. That's important, but the stuff you're talking about, headphone mix, vibe, making sure that everybody in the room is in tune to what's going on, and like paying attention, and the talkback etiquette, like all those things are so much more important than the mic. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I understand, because I used to, when I was in house, and I'd get, so we I don't know how it's worked as studios you've worked at, but there'd be downtime. So if there was no bookings, we'd have like local bands come in, and they got me. I had no idea what I was doing, trying to record them, and I'd be like, man, it doesn't sound like Nirvana, and I'd be like, so angry and frustrated. I had a world-class studio in front of me. It took me a long time to realize it was because it was a bad song with a bad player, with it's never
going to sound like Nirvana unless it's Nirvana.
Exactly, and it's like all of the gear side of it. I met a guy I used to work with, another producer who was so inspirational to me and taught me so much. I remember, as a sort of, like I was saying about reading all the manuals at the studio, and I think I was like, one day I was like, yeah, man, I was like, I think I know how to use every single thing that's in here, and he was like, right, you've just started, which is so true. The gear is. You have to sort of understand it. You have to understand it, but then to get it out the way.
Right. And also,
it's like my thing with Pro Tools. Like, I'd love to look at Luna. I've been really interested seeing you talk about it. At the same time, the reason I've stayed with Pro Tools for so long, and I'm like, man, I was on like version 4, like 98, when it was like 4-track, is because I don't have to look at my hands. I'm quick on it, and that's not like I'm really good at Pro Tools. It's then out of the equation to making music.
It's
not
a barrier for creativity that's been removed.
Absolutely. That's exactly. It's the same reason I engineer a lot myself, because it's not like I'm some egomaniac. Like, I'm a good engineer, but it's so much easier for me to just go da 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 rather than tell someone else to go.
And then it's their version of da da da, not yours too. There's that. There's some lossless, compression between those two things. I was like,
it's just removing that for the process, and it's like, for us to remove it from the artist process. Like, so many artists now know so much more about gear than they used to, and that's fantastic. You know, all of the digital technology and just the fact that I think it's become a bit more mainstream and people are a bit more interested in it. It's not like those guys are doing that thing with their weird machines. And, you know, but the whole point that not the whole point that we're there, but part of what I think is the reason that we are there and should do is remove all of that from their process, like the headphone thing. Some artist doesn't, you know, they like him or her don't want to be. Why am I trying to balance something in my headphones? Like give it to me. It's all of that thing of removing all of the stuff we spent years learning about. So because then we know it, and then it's not a consideration to the creative process.
One of the things that I think is important too that you sort of alluded to with the like, oh, I know what all this gear does, and he's like, yeah, okay, cool. You know, you're just starting, and it's knowing what they do, but knowing when to use that particular thing, like and what, and I think all those, whatever choice you make for that is like your own personal relationship with that sound. Like for whatever reason, for me, like if I get a vocal, I immediately, like if I'm mixing, I immediately have like an idea of like, oh, I need this style of vocal, this style of the song, the way the singer is singing, the way the, you know, whatever mic they used, like I need an 1176 style or an 1176, or this feels more like an LA2A, and that's not necessarily like I don't have that inclination because I know how to turn the knobs. It's like you have that inclination of like, because you spent time with that piece of gear, you know how they sound, you know sort of what qualities they bring to the vocal and what qualities they're going to bring to the mix, and it's all just time in the chair, you know, and time.
Absolutely. But when you say you use it, you don't use it because you know what all the knobs do. I guess you do, because it then you know what it's going to. I know I still use SSL channels in Pro Tools, different versions over the years, and I go between different ones, but it's because I know what it will do, and I know how to use it.
And the consistency.
So whatever it is I need at that point, you know, whether it be the compression section or whether it be the EQ, I've got many things that would do that. People would argue that there's even the versions that I use, or you know, oh, there's a much better model and it sounds like this, or you know, oh, but no, but that EQ would do that. It's like that doesn't matter. I can get it to do the thing that I need it to do at that point without thinking about it, because I do know what the knobs do, but that's then subconscious.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like absolutely, I couldn't agree more, man.
Here's my quick Luna pitch, just because I genuinely think that you would like crush it with it. I feel like. I will say it's a little clunky in some aspects. You know, editing is not quite like Pro Tools. A lot of the same key commands and all that stuff translates over because it was built. Some of the guys that designed, was it Digital Performer? Was that the original? Whatever.
The Marketing one.
Before it was Pro Tools, was it Digital Performer? I guess.
Audio Media.
So I guess some of the guys that designed the early version of Pro Tools are on the Luna design team. So a lot of stuff translates key command wise, and it functions very similarly. There are some things in there when you get in, like routing, that is actually at first seemingly like, well, why is it that way? But then it's like super intuitive and quick. But one of the things I think in seeing the way you've built sessions that I've received is like the ability to track with a bunch of cool different shit on the way in. Like you can track with distortion pedals and different EQs and different compressors, and you can stack that all on the way in, and you can use it as just a monitor like path, or you can commit with it too. And I feel like I would be really interested to see like a tracking, what you would do with a tracking session.
That sounds really fun.
Someone like
that sounds really
you would
fun.
Just crush it with that. Real quick, mixing. We kind of touched on mixing. Are you mostly in the box, or are you? Well,
I was. Well, obviously, you know, I was. You know, I started mixing from tape, so I have been I've gone through the various stages. I've been quite fortunate. Like I was saying about I started learning Pro Tools in like '98.
Yeah.
I think so. I saw it come from a thing we'd slave and do vocal takes to, and then obviously now it's the thing. I really struggled within the box mixing at first. Like I was forced into it because I was like 2 days, big 56 frame SSL, loads of outboard recalls.
Yeah.
And mixing to 1/2 inch, and just it was expensive, but it sounded good. And then trying to mix in Pro Tools was like, I just lost my mind.
Yeah.
I think part of a lot of what I do is, as you probably noticed, there's huge amounts of distortion and saturation. So my SSL mixes, like the meters they barely, maybe the mid late they come back a little bit, but like that was how it wasn't a cheat. It was just the way that my mixes worked. That was how I mixed. I pushed the boards, pushed the EQs, loads of parallel returns, lots of parallel compression. Like I used to route stuff back into the small faders and have stuff going from group sends. So things are going into things, molting bits of the drum kit and bass and stuff and returning it, like super, super complex mixes. So the delay compensation at first couldn't deal with that and drove me fucking insane. Like we were like, you literally had calculators on the desk.
Oh my God.
And would be putting notes of like, okay, I moved that back, and then the producer's like, no, did you move that back? And it's all phasing. They eventually got that sorted out, and it's good now. Also, saturation, not digital clipping, but there were no plugins that felt like the way that I could push a desk. The game changer for me was the Slate VCC.
Okay, yeah.
When that first came out, the original, when it was just on its own. And I read the Sound on Sound thing about it, and I was like, okay, is this just hype? And then I got it and was like, okay, right, that's starting to sound
more.
Also, getting used to the input method.
Yeah.
Was like a mouse, they're like, I'd mix for an afternoon and I'm touching all the faders all the time, and I'm making little tweaks on the EQ all the time, like gently massaging this thing together. And the like having, bass drum, and just even like trying to unsolo stuff that was a bit ugly and groups and all of that stuff. So it took me a while to get there and to start getting happy with the results. But now I just, like what we can do with automation, with the speed we have to work now with recall, the sound of what we can do is just insane. Like records now sound so
they really do. And
it's like
just the automation for me alone, like I'm constantly doing little tiny automation things that like you said, you're gently sort of massaging the way the mix is going, like in the analog world, but like the things that you're able to do creatively of just like, for this one section, for this one little thing, this band goes shoo, and then back, and then, or this delay does this crazy thing, or the compression gets fucking wild and you can feel it all clamp down and then release. And it, like the stuff that you're able to do that you just physically wouldn't be able to do on a,
there was no way.
Automating.
We used to have the pencil marks on the desk, and you'd have the band around, doing moves with all of you, like on the last tape. I'd be on maybe a gate that I'd have to like bring the threshold up at a certain point, so it released at a certain point, and that was like the amount of detail that you could go into. I used to sample quite a lot of stuff. I was big into sampling even in like hardware days. So like delay spins, I'd get Space Echo and I'd spin that. So then I'd sample it and then go into my Atari ST, run it along with the tape, and then so I spin that there. But like just being able to do that stuff
instantly,
like that now it's just mind blowing to me. What we can do. It doesn't make it any easier. In some ways it makes it harder, because to me now the skill is what not to do sometimes in a mix or a production, because I can put on a fucking orchestra and I can put it through any plugin model of any desk that I want to. I've got way too many plugins, but just going, okay, that's that and that and that, and I'll use that. But the depth of and breadth of creativity that we have, and just the width of stuff now. You know, we're like 20 to 20, and this wide, and can manage those frequencies and contain them because we can mix in a way that you can deal with,
and
that
you
stuff.
can mix things that are so much bigger and louder than ever before. That like. I feel bad for mastering engineers now because I feel like they're sort of just being pushed out farther into like the outskirts of recording, because it's like half the time I'll print a mix and it's like, well, Spotify's already going to turn that mix down, you know, and that's not even like printing super hot. Like I got a rough mix the other day. It was at like -7 LUFS. I was like, fuck, man.
Nice.
How am I gonna compete with the mix here on this, guys? But it's really just, it's kind of, for me, it's like the golden era of production. I know like all the old recordings and stuff, there's this romanticized thing, and rightfully so. Musicians were different. Singers, they were built different. Same with, recording at that time. But right now we're just in this space where, like you said, you can make things just sound so good.
But I entirely agree. So two things here. So the old recordings, right? It's the thing that makes me sort of laugh about this, right? There was a lot of people recording back then, man. They wanted their stuff to sound like what it sounds now. They wanted to put up some mics and go, oh, fuck, that sounds like the mic that I put up. That all of the technology isn't... Those guys were freaking out. The reason those records are distorted, don't get me wrong, I fucking love the sound of those records, but it wasn't deliberate. Right. The reason all the Motown stuff is pinned and distorted is because they're just trying to get level, and the desks are narrowing, and taking out frequencies. So it's become this revered thing, and rightly so. It suits that music to our ears so beautifully. But those guys were freaking out. Like, they just wanted a signal on input. Okay, that's what it sounds like. And then it's on record, and they come back through repro, goes through their mixer, goes on at the 7-inch. It's nothing like it was designed. This is in no way negative.
No.
Like those, and it's a lot to do with the same of, you know, the whole tape thing. Is it's a medium that degenerates sound.
Right.
Okay, frequency wise, it degenerates it. It adds compression and harmonic distortion, so that in some ways enhances it because it's more pleasant to our ears. But a lot of the romanticism about tape, when people say to me they want to work on tape, which is less and less now, but I'm like, we can work on Pro Tools and I'll put it in destructive record and we'll have 24 tracks. It's the way of working more than the sonic benefits that it may or may not bring.
Yes.
And I agree, it's like golden age. And then the mastering thing, man, like we used to do a mix. When I say we, I'd be like assisting, and you'd put it in an envelope on a cassette and you'd send it to the band. You'd get it like 2 days later, and then they'd phone up on like old school phone and be like, oh, maybe this and maybe this, and you'd be like, okay, cool. And then you'd have to recall it all and do a couple of changes, and then the mastering would make a huge difference because we didn't have like the incredible EQs that they had in the studio, limiters, like, you know, like the SPL limiters that those guys were using, and like even the L2, the hardware one. They weren't things that you had in studios. They weren't things that people knew about. And I mastering to me is still very, very important. But what I'm delivering, my point being, what I'm delivering now to people is basically how it's going to sound.
Yes.
I will then send it to the mastering engineers that I use, who are all incredible, and it will sound way better, but not entirely different.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it's not become less important because the outside perspective and the equipment that they have beyond what I have, and the things that I take off my digital 2 bus that they then recreate, whether it be analog or digital. I actually don't know what a lot of the guys that I work with using, and I sort of don't want to. but they always send it back and it sounds better than the version that I sent. But it's just a lot. What I'm sending is a lot closer.
Right. Yeah.
To how it's going to be. I had mixes rejected back in the day because I was so old school, man. Like I didn't want to tune anything. I didn't want to limit anything. I was like really like, ugh, just a tape head.
Yeah.
It's how I'd grown up. And I had mixes rejected and then I'd send them back with an L2 on and people would go, oh, what have you done? That's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way that people are used to hearing music, So
and that's also, sorry to cut you off. That's also the way that they're used to listening too. Like you said, a lot of artists are much more familiar now with the gear, and a lot have their own setups at home, and they don't know that you're not supposed to have 7 dB of reduction on an L2. Like it just sounds fucking rocking. They're like, man, this is like, they don't. But
this is the fix. Sorry to cut you off, but the 7 dB, like not supposed to. What's not supposed to? If it sounds good, it just doesn't. It just doesn't matter. I work for a couple of people that used to be gaffer tape over the meters, and I still sort of work.
I love that.
Like partly because I still work hot because I like the sound of that. But sometimes I'll mix and I'll look at my two bus and I'm like, whoa! I don't want anyone to ever see that, but this sounds sick. But why don't I want someone to see it? Because of some rules that I've been told by people. When it just doesn't matter. If it sounds good, it sounds good. It does not matter what is going on to that point. Like 7 dB on a limiter can completely destroy something, and that would be the reason it wasn't sounding good. But at that point, if it sounds good,
it sounds good.
I don't care. Print it. It's
so that actually, I'm curious as to. So you don't really. If you're gonna send something to mastering and it's hot, you're like, it's just hot. That's just it sounds good. That's how I want it.
I take off my limiter at the end of my chain.
Okay.
And I'll sometimes take off EQ.
Okay.
But generally, the listen version will be called limit, and it's got a limiter on, and and then it'll be an unlimited.
An unlimited, and you don't have like any sort of just soft limiting to keep red lights off.
Yeah, if it's really hot, just
like a little kiss, just to make sure there's no. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I've started doing in the last, like you said, I've lost out on some mix shootouts, and you realize it's like, oh, it's just a volume thing. Like I sent a mix that was what I was thought was reasonable, like back sort of touching on the like being old school, like, oh, it's minus 14 LUFS, it's perfect for mastering. They'll know that this is a good mix. And then like I'll never forget, somebody sent me I was close with the producer on this particular record that they were having mixers try out for, and he's like, well, you didn't come in last, but you didn't win, so here's the mix that we did pick. And I remember like I listened to it, I was like, wow, the mix is, first of all, it should have won, it was a great mix, but it was 7 dB louder than mine. So it's like, oh, how do you compete?
It's really
whether or not it's good or it isn't is almost irrelevant to the listener when it's so much quieter.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult because I think we're getting through the loudness wars thing to an extent. The fact of the matter is, if you play something to someone and then you play them something else that's 0.1 dB louder, that will sound better. Whatever better is, it's just the way that it triggers the brain. It's like that side of it. That is the thing. The loudness wars, as I don't really like it being called, but like that's a thing that's happened, right? We're all hitting the top. Like, so we're digital and we're all hitting the top. Then it sort of comes down to, I've also smashed the shit out of some really good mixes, thinking that, oh, well, if mine's really loud, it will probably get it. And now listening back to it, I'm like, you just ruined some really good work. A lot of this has also come about because of spec mixing and mix-offs, which, so which is the way the industry's gone, and I have varying opinions about it. It's probably for another conversation, but also comparison. Like if I'm in my car, right, or I'm at home, and me and my wife are listening to music, it's constantly getting turned up and down.
Yes.
I don't just like put a record on it, because the song would be maybe a bit quieter, or we're talking, or whatever. And when people are listening to mixes, I think that they generally do that, but the problem is now that you can line them all up in Pro Tools or whatever, and I am guilty of doing this when I have mastering. Yes. My point being, you really just need to listen from the start to the end and have the emotion. Okay, so because that's what's important about the mix and the sonic and everything else about it. But if you're just straight A-Bing and anything comes in louder, albeit you've got, we're talking about people that know what they're doing, right? It's not just going to be something that sounds like a bag of spanners. It's a good mix and there's another good mix. Then volume will push the loudest mix out into a more positive reaction. And it's very difficult. The start to end thing, I think, is something that got quite lost with digital technology, and I still try and make myself do it a lot more, of just actually listening to the whole thing instead of obsessing on sections. And even with comping and judging performances, so I know we're talking about mixing, but if you repeatedly hear something that that drum feels a bit quick, or let me play it again, no, it definitely is, in the context of a 4-minute song, when the guy, like the singer has absolutely rips it, that's the thing you're listening to. It's a very different way of listening to it, and it needs to be reminded with people sometimes. At the same time, we're all trying to earn a living, and we are competing with each other, so we will do it.
Yeah, I know.
We'll make our stuff louder to try and get noticed. So it's what
it is. You'll find the wall at some point.
It is.
Eventually they're gonna just say no. I've had mastering engineers a couple of times, and it's usually guys that aren't full-time like mastering engineers. I think most full-time mastering engineers are just like, they're so used to it. They're just like, yeah, I know how to work with whatever. But where I've had, in the last, I think it was a couple months ago, where they're like, hey, can you take off all your tubas? I'm like, what? Like, we want an unlimited mix, and like, any compression on the $2, can you just take off? It's like, absolutely not. Like, why would I do that? Like,
of course not.
Are you remixing the mix? Because that's essentially what's going to happen. Like, this particular mix is like glued together with all this stuff. And it's like, sure, I could turn it down for you if you'd like, or I could remove, and I wasn't even like limiting it, but it was just like, that's part of the deal. It's like, we're able to make that sound now. And that was just the thing. It's just.
But even back in the day, I would always have the quad compressor on the desk and a GML EQ, in straight away. 60 hertz, 16K, 4-to-1 slow attack, fast release. That would be in the whole time, because I'm not going to put that shit in afterwards. Like, that is just part of the mix. I've been told off by mastering engineers sometimes, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'll get someone else to do it, because it's like, that's the thing that I've sent you. The best mastering engineers that I work with, and I'm very fortunate to work with some of the best, none of that stuff's a problem. Occasionally they'll be like, man, I'm really having to work like whatever, this bottom end or whatever, could you just give me a version, because then I'll have to do less at this end or whatever. But the guys that I really like, and the guys that I've stuck with, are the ones that clearly listen to the emotion.
Yes, of the song. They take themselves out of it too. I think sometimes, it can be like, well, I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to make it way louder, and I can't. It's like, well, just make it better.
Just like sometimes, I've had, and it's very complimentary. I'm like, what have you done, man? And they're like, I just ran it through some stuff, like just Transformers. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, it's like there's a fog lifted. It didn't need anything. And then sometimes it's like, I'm like, what have you done? It's like, it's amazing. Well, I did this and this and this. Like, when I've had stuff back where it's louder and brighter than my already too loud and too bright mix, I'm like, what are you doing? Like you said, that's just because it's just like default.
Yeah. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm a mastering engineer.
But as I was saying earlier, I'm not meaning to, and I'm not in any way being negative to mastering because also, and I realise you're not either. But for someone to also go, I've just put it through some transformers, and that's all it needed. Is fantastic for me, not in an ego way to go, oh, I smashed the mix. It's just like, okay, that's cool, that's all it needed. But just to have a trusted other pair of ears on the song, and to do what is right for the emotion of it, like that's a real art, and it's equipment I don't have, and it's a perspective I don't have once I've mixed or produced or whatever process I've been through that song, which is so and important.
They're building like an incredible amount of trust too, to just go like, oh well, I didn't need to do anything else, and you're like, wow, I trust this person with the next project already because they made the right choice without overstepping.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I want to move into a couple rapid fire questions if you're keen for that. So,
so hang on, you want one word answer?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. I say rapid fire, but then we end up on tangents anyways. But the best or favorite bad action movie from the 80s or 90s, if you have one.
Bad action movie. It's got to be Die Hard, hasn't it?
That's a good one. Yeah.
Okay.
That's one of my favorites. I'm a sucker for shitty action movies. I will sit down and watch almost any of them. So I know it puts some people off. But favorite studio meal. If you're going to be working in the studio, what's your favorite meal to have?
Oh, like to eat in the studio?
I have on the session. Sushi?
Yeah, sushi, yeah.
That's a fun one, especially if you get everybody involved. You can kind of have this nice look, like communal.
Exactly. Doesn't stink out the studio. Makes you feel really nice and fresh. Sharing element involved.
As opposed to, we used to do Baja Burrito, which is a Nashville staple.
I've heard about this. I've never visited Nashville, but I've always wanted to. I've heard about it.
Yeah, you'd love it. But yes, Baja Burrito, and that was inevitably like day one because it was always cheap and like day one, and then by 3 o'clock everybody's fucking passed out on the couch because they just takes you out, man. Dream car.
Oh, E-Type Jaguar.
Ooh, okay. Nice. Like newer? I don't know the E-Type.
No, like the old school ones.
Old school.
Like the classic.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I got you now. This is a good one. Most overrated piece of gear.
External clocks.
External clocks. Okay. All right, I can buy it. What's the last record you listened to front to back, or that impressed you?
New?
Doesn't have to be new. Just whatever the most recent one is that you listened to front to back, or if there's a new one that you listened to and were really impressed by.
The Stephen Fretwell.
I don't know him.
Records, English singer-songwriter.
I'm gonna write that.
Someone put me onto it recently. He hadn't done anything for a long time, and he came back and made this record, and it's just fantastic.
Okay.
It's like very acoustic singer-songwriter stuff, but so that stuff can be, it can be what it is, and regardless of people's voices or songwriting, it can just sort of sit in the world. But the additional things that are going on in this record, plus lyrics that will make you in 1 minute laugh with hysterics and in 1 minute want to curl up into a ball and cry.
Okay.
It just, the way it conveys emotion, like it was one I put on to listen and wasn't expecting to do the whole thing, and then suddenly I'm at the end and I was like,
I love those.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
Too far and few between nowadays, but they
very much so.
Makes it more special now though when you find one.
Yeah.
So the podcast is called One More for Safety. Everybody that's been in the studio has heard that a million times. So this is sort of my one more for safety question to sort of wrap us up and let you get out of here. I usually kind of switch this one up, but I think this is the first time I've asked anybody this. But if you could be a fly on the wall for any session that's taken place already, what one would it be? Why? For any record.
Okay. All right, I'm going to say Bleach by Nirvana. My favourite band ever. Just completely changed my life. And that was a record that I went back to having heard Nevermind. And there's a lot of footage and stuff about Nevermind, and there's a lot of and ever since then there's you can read a lot about those records, but Bleach there doesn't seem to be much documentation of, and it's probably one of my favourite records my favourite record that they made, and also it was before it all went nuts. So I'd love to see just the energy on that session at that point.
That would be tremendous. Well, look, man, I so enjoyed this. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
This was such a blast. I'm such a fan. I love all your work, and I'm so glad that we got to sort of meet face to face, and you could take the time to do this. So, if you want to, anything that you got coming out, you want to, check out there, promote, or your Instagram handle, or wherever people can find you.
So my Instagram's at AustinMusic79. There's things about stuff that's come out recently. There's been a bit of a lull because of COVID. Of I normally have stacked releases, records you did a year ago, and then they start dripping, and then that pool ran out. But there's lots of stuff being talked about. But look, man, it's so lovely to meet you, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
This is great. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah. No, without
thanks,
doubt.
man. Have a good day.
Nice one.
Night.
Yeah, you too. See you.